how do we not just situationally treat autism, but how do we globally as a social group blend and collaborate cohesively all these approaches in one model? And it's been super rewarding.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Polaris Connection, your podcast that connects parents of autistic children with industry expert and resources. I am your host, Brad Broyles, and I'm here with my special, amazing co-host, Nathan Palmer.
Brad, glad to be here and always a pleasure. This is a special episode this week.
How is that?
Well, I think word is getting out about the awesome things that we're doing. Redemption Psychiatry, a local group in Arizona, invited us to participate on their podcast.
Oh, that's amazing. How can we listen to it?
You know what? You can listen to it by just staying tuned because we're going to play it for you right now.
All right, let's do it.
In 2000, 1 out of 150 children were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, while in 2022, 1 in 31 children was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. While there's a lot of reasons for why that might be, one of the big questions that parents have been having is how do we take care of these children? While there's plenty of different institutions and organizations trying to solve that problem, maybe none of them have been doing it better than Polaris Academy, a new school located in Mesa, Arizona, with revolutionary ways of taking care of children and supporting them in ways that are really unique and really innovative. Today, I'm interviewing Nathan Palmer, the CEO and co-founder, to talk about what those things are and how he created it. Cool. Nathan?
Yeah.
How you doing?
I'm great, and thanks for the intro. I mean, I feel like I'm a little more accomplished than what I feel I am sometimes by the introduction, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a lot of questions for you today. I'm really, really excited. I was able to come tour your school a couple weeks ago. That was really, really impressive. We tour a lot of places, all types, and you guys were incredibly put together, and it was really eye-opening because I could see that there wasn't a show put on, right? You were just like, this is what we do. This is every day.
Yeah, we're real. I mean, that you got exactly who and what we are.
Right, and that's just so admirable to me. So let's start with a brief overview of what Polaris is, just so that we kind of have a framework, and then let's go into, after that, we'll talk about kind of how that was created.
Yeah, sure. What is it? It changes every little bit, but it operates on a philosophy. What it is it's an attempt, really by me as a parent of a child on the autism spectrum, to deliver more services in one place, in one collaborative environment. There are so many options out there and so many approaches, as you were mentioning in your introduction, to how do we address this thing called autism. And Polaris Academy was our effort to say, instead of doing this here and doing that over there, how much can we do all together in one spot, and what would that look like? And so it's blending supportive therapies with a traditional academic experience in a way that's more inclusive than I'd ever seen. So that was kind of the goal. It's what we are, and it's this really incubator of what can you do when you blend things in a way that's not a medical environment but still has these clinically trained staff in a teaching system. And it's been fun. It's been hugely rewarding.
Cool. Sweet. So I want to dive in a little bit more as to what that looks like on the day-to-day. If I was a student, or let's say like I enroll my child, what is his first day going to look like?
You said first day, and Garrett, the first day is always interesting. Mm-hmm. First day last year was chaos because we were new. And I mean, our first day open, just in full disclosure, our first day open as a business was August 1, 2024. So that was day one of everything. Mm-hmm. And it was a learning curve on so many levels. We had kids that didn't know each other, so they were coming together for the first time. We had this blended experience, which is class, but also therapy supports, and not in the sense of pull out. Like a traditional education experience is, well, this kid needs supports, and so we pull them out of class to do these one-on-one interventions. We don't do that. It's just all part of class. So they're getting this experience they've never had before. Our staff was a blend of medical clinical staff with academic staff that have never worked together before. So that was their first day together. I mean, there was a lot of firsts. And so I'm going to jump to this year's first day. Our hope is it just feels like school. It just feels like normal school. And I use normal loosely, but the experience of most kids on the spectrum, anywhere they go, they're the odd one out, right? And so school isn't normal because there's all these other normal things and they're the abnormality. We want them to be able to go to a place and feel like it is just school. There's nothing distinct. They just get to have their experience in a place and feel like every other kid that they've ever seen in a holistic and educational way.
So one of the tricky things about autism spectrum disorder is the spectrum component, right? Is you have lower and higher functioning. You have kids who struggle more with communication, verbalization, others with sensory response.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the reasons why, maybe not necessarily to the best interest of the kid's development, a lot of times they have been pulled out into one-on-one interactions with strictly adults, right?
Yeah.
How do you manage that component of just how wide of a spectrum there is and how different kids can need so many different things?
It has been, so that question, Garrett, is more loaded, I think, than you realize. It has been a journey of discovery. How do you do that, right? I think that's the question we're continually trying to answer. And maybe let me touch on something you kind of hit on. Typical therapy is one-to-one, right? It's an adult and a child. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of it is, from a clinical perspective, it's more intensive, right? So they get to focus just their attention because every kid is unique, and especially in the spectrum,
Right.
you know, the saying is you've met one kid on the spectrum and you've met one kid on the spectrum.
Yeah.
But there's other reasons. There's regulatory reasons, which is there's HIPAA concerns and medical disclosure and protecting client confidentiality. There's other regulatory concerns of billing, like how do I track services from one kid versus another? And so the clinical approach is, well, if I have one adult, one child, all those things are easy to answer. Confidentiality is built in. But it's counterintuitive because the biggest thing we're trying to do for these kids, right, help them to integrate into society, to develop their social developmental skills, their emotional regulation components. We accomplish that by sticking them in a confined room with an adult, right? And so the more and more I meet parents, and autism can be a lonely world. Like you talk to parents out there, yes, there's services everywhere for the kids, but the way they're run, it's like you still feel isolated as an adult. You're on your own floating island. And so, you know, I meet more and more parents now with this school and hearing their stories, and this common component is, yeah, my son was at school or my daughter's at school, and the principal's their best friend, or the teacher's their best friend, or the coach is their best friend, but they have no friends. Or they go to the park and they relate with the adults versus the kids. And so we're, I think, unintentionally programming this secure relationship that we don't want to be what they actually grow into. We want them to socialize. So that solving that problem, right? How do we do that? The whole idea of Polaris was, look, rather than running these as medical programs, and rather than running this where we're billing insurance and now we're subject to all these other medical regulation criteria, the big question, the what if is, well, what if you hire all these people as school employees? What if you're not running a clinic? What if it really is just an academic institution? So in addition to your normal teachers and aides, you have these medically trained, clinically proficient professionals as really just overqualified classroom aides, right? Then what can you do? And the answer is, well, whatever you want. You know, if you read some of these like insurance manuals, I'll use ABA as an example, right? So it's one of the most common, you know, data-driven, substantiated therapies for social and behavioral development for kids on the spectrum. Well, if you read the insurance binders on the exclusions, what can you not use ABA for? There's a whole page on you can do these things, you can't do these. And Garrett, the exclusion page reads like the scope of work that I ask our clinicians to do at Polaris. Right. You know, in an insurance setting, you can't work on academic goals. You can't work on vocational programming. You know, you can't work on behaviors within a athletic or a school setting. I mean, there's all these things that are just, you're limited by. And when we took the insurance component away, the question was, well, now what can we do? So to answer your question, what does that look like? We're answering that every day. How can we merge it in? And we realize we're creating this new form of therapy that you actually can't get in a clinic because it is group-based. And, how do you avoid the HIPAA concerns? It's easy. You just don't tell the group whose goals you're focusing on. But we can still data track. And so we can still take meaningful program data and we can still do analytics. We just don't do disclosure. And now these kids that have either been, super anxious because one-on-one with an adult, I mean, we're in this podcast and there's lights and there's focused attention. Well, it's anxiety inducing when it's just one child and one provider. But put them in a group of kids now. And now do these same type of workshops and these same type of interventions, but with peer support and with peer modeling and not feeling like they're the center of attention. And I'll tell you, they blossom. And so what we've been able to see and create by just answering that question, how do we approach that? It's been eye-opening because, one, our clinicians are unleashed. They get to use their skills without the fear of, am I following protocol? It's just what's in the best interest of the child, of the group. And it allows us, I think, to really holistically look at how do we not just situationally treat autism, but how do we globally as a social group blend and collaborate cohesively all these approaches in one model. And it's been super rewarding.
Wow.
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but I mean, that was
so
a loaded
cool.
question because it's how do we do it? We're I think right now we're truthfully just scratching the surface. Every month we get new data and new ideas of integration, and it's been awesome.
No, Nathan, that's fantastic. When you say it, it makes so much sense, and it really begs the question of why it hasn't been done before. But the answer really does come down very often to insurance, right? Qualifications, standards. This is something that we deal with a lot at Redemption Psychiatry. Is insurance will be like, well, you have to do something this exact specific way, even when that's very clearly not what the patient needs, which is infuriating. It's something that we do a lot of workarounds for because we're here to take care of people. Right?
Yeah. And I hate to demonize insurance for it. I mean, it's a blessing in a lot of ways to have that support. And if you look back at the beginnings of a lot of these therapeutic approaches, whether it was ABA or OT or speech, once we realized they worked, right, and they were a viable option, the question is, well, how do we make these available to the masses? Because it's not inexpensive, right? This is not cheap. And so the solution was, well, let's use insurance because people have insurance, and that's a way for everybody to have availability of these resources. And the downside of that in making it available was it curtailed this field that was, applied behavior analytics. And it said, well, now we just can apply it to medical necessity. So it's less, I think, that anybody's trying to do it wrong. And it's more a symptom of the vehicle we chose to make it mass available.
Yeah.
In personal opinion. I mean,
No, I totally agree with you. Again, very similar. That's what we deal with here. Is like we take every private insurance almost under the sun. There's always an exception somehow, but it's trying to find that balance of like we want to make sure this is as cheap and as affordable and as viable for as many people as possible, but also we want to do what's really best for the patient, right? Really best for the child. I really want to touch on your school store. And I'm probably jumping the gun a little bit. I know there's a lot of other things we can discuss.
we can bounce as much as you want.
Sweet. So when I went, you had a school store, 3D printers running, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then you talked about, that's all the kids. So I would love for you to break down how that came about, what it is. Please tell me the story again.
Yeah. So the school store specifically is a funny story. I'm not an academically trained professional. Like my background is not in education. It's not in therapy. So it's funny because, I have this school for autistic kids and we're doing these things and people ask, where was your training? And I was like, well, I was a contract attorney and a real estate broker. I mean, that's who I was, but I was a dad. And I think like so many parents out there, I just had these wish list things that I wish I had this for my son, or I wish I had this experience. And one of the things we wanted to develop in education was applied learning, right? Not just you go to school and you learn abstract concepts and do worksheets, but you can actually see how those things translate into functional living. And we had already conceptualized like a STEM center and a culinary center to give like, this is what school looks like at home, and this is what school looks like in community. And there was this odd alcove in our front admin space that I had planned to be like a storage closet. And I started doing tours for our school, Garrett, and I can admit this today, and I just bless all the parents that gave us the faith and trust they did in the stage we were. But we were touring the school while we were under construction. Like literally it was an empty shell, and I'm telling parents, there's going to be a wall here, and this is going to be a classroom. And we're explaining this vision of the model, but in a space that I would never have trusted my kid in, and yet these parents are walking through. And one day I'm looking at this little alcove, and I just had this vision of a storefront. I'm like, oh, and this is going to be a store. And it just was born out of a tour. And it was this fluke thought that hit me. And the more I thought on it, the more it grew. And so we use the Polaris stores as a learning center. And I would say it's in its infancy. The idea was any teacher, any class, whether it's a kindergartner or a 10th grader, can be working on math or science or any functional skill. And then the teacher can go, well, let me show you what that looks like in business. This is what addition looks like in a store. This is what multiplication, and it's in fun ways, right? We can do inventory management. We can teach them data and spreadsheets, which is functional. But we can also teach them design and innovation. What do we want to sell in the store? And how do you come up with those ideas? How do you market it? How do you analyze back-end margins and do analysis? So that's teaching them critical thinking and study and executive function with applied math and ELA. I mean, it's everything school's built for, but in an environment that they get to explore. And so we incorporated 3D printers in there. I mean, when you first look at it, you're like, oh, this is the swag shop for the school, but our students are designing our products. Our students are coming up with ideas of what to put in there, and they're going through the steps of what works, what doesn't. They're doing their own voting system, right? So we're doing creation innovation, and underneath all that, the 3D printers allows them to actually prototype new product ideas. If I was going to start my business, what do I do? One of my favorites is there's a pencil holder one of our students came up with, and it was just a conceptual design, turned it into a 3D model, and then we printed it, right? And it's a pencil holder with these arms outreached. So if you stick a pencil in the top, it's a pencil holder, but it will also hold the pencil in your hand. So it's a pencil holder that holds. I mean, I love the way their minds work.
It's so charming, yeah.
You know, and a younger kid might pick a different style hand to put on it or a different color or customize it with a name. But with the older class, I'm going to ask, well, that specialized filament is two-tone. What was the cost of the roll? What was my per unit production cost? How much can I customize it before it's not cost efficient? What should I market it for? What are competitors doing? What's my margins? Is it viable? And, you know, out of that was born a business that my junior high class came up with and executed last year on a food service idea. And it was one they came up with. So by creating the space, they're like, well, if we're doing business, can we really start one? And they pitched me. I felt like I was on an episode of Shark Tank, but I was the only shark. And they did a full presentation with PowerPoint. And Garrett, it was I was proud they just had the idea. Right? And then they said, well, we went to all the classrooms and we got this data from our peers. I'm like, I'm proud you just went and presented with a friend in front of kids and extracted and analyzed data. And then they put it together and it says, now we have this need and we're filling it, and here's our business, and here's the name, and here's the order forms, and here's how we're going to source it, and here's the research we did. And I'm like, I'm blown away. And so we want to start our own business. And I'm like, thumbs up before they're even done.
Yeah.
They made over $1,000 last year running their own business that they can now fund their own student initiatives. And I've got fourth graders, first day of school this year, like, Mr. Palmer, I can't wait till I'm in that class because I have an idea for a business. And so it created this win, you know, where you don't just come to school to be bored or to be worked to death, but they start to see what it's for. Maybe there's some limitations, but that doesn't mean they can't innovate. It doesn't mean that they can't be creative. And so we celebrate that in just the funnest way with the stores. That's selfishly, it's one of my favorite spots. And again, I think we're just scratching the surface of what that can mean for educational application for the kids.
Right. I think that's fantastic. It really, one of the things that I always had a disdain for school. And one of the reasons is because we always started with abstraction and then moved towards application.
Yeah.
I have always been a strong believer and supporter of you start with application and you move towards abstraction. If you want to teach a kid gravity, start by dropping a ball. Like, just start there, right? There's no need to start with the formulas and the equations, and when they don't have, and this is why math is so tricky for a lot of kids, is because they're like, okay, but like, what's the context, right?
Yeah.
Why, where, and story problems only go so far. When you put it in real world and when there's real cost, more than just a grade, associated with understanding and doing something right, you unlock the dopamine pathway, right? The reward center of, oh, like doing this is leading me towards things I want. And that's going to drive learning so much more efficiently than, well, just learn this because eventually you're going to need it. And if not, well, the SATs, maybe, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is so much better, and it's so much more efficient, especially as over the past decade or so, there's been an intensifying debate going over the value of higher education, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to comment on that either way, but objectively, a lot of people are wondering if it's really worth it anymore. And so when you're taking kids who previously wouldn't have been looked at as able to be competitive, and they're doing stuff that kids twice their age wouldn't have been doing, it's so, I'm just enamored by it, right? It's fantastic because no matter what happens, they can take that mentality and those skill sets and succeed later on in life.
100%.
So that's just so cool.
Yeah, and private education gave us some of that flexibility. It's the way you said it was so much more eloquent than I did, because again, I have no academic background, but I always looked at comparative grading or performance-based grading. Like, you get your A, B, C, D, or F based on how well we test that you incorporated the data. And you can't do that with this crowd because they're so diverse. So, testing for us is not checking proficiency. Testing for us is data analysis. It's where are the deficiencies, so that we can use testing as a metric for curriculum development, not for their performance. Right? It's just a different approach. And even production, to your point, instead of just having it be, I'm producing abstract responses, we can test proficiencies on production. Instead of giving them just an ABCD quiz, well, show me that you know the information. Show me that you incorporated this in a project or in a PowerPoint or in a presentation, so that we're not limiting them to just your standard, public education metrics. It's individualized, and it's been fun to see even how they come up with production to show proficiencies. And so it's standards based more than, production or even, comparative analysis based.
That's great. It reminds me of a really great quote, which I'm sure I'm about to butcher, but it's, if a captain wants to build a boat, before he gets wood, before he finds his sail, everything else, the first thing he has to do is make his sailors yearn for the sea, right? And it's after that the building process goes smoothly. Everybody comes together because the desire's there. And it's that desire that really drives learning, innovation, and everything you're looking for in education. I want to jump back now into how all of this happened. You said that you started out in real estate, right?
Yeah.
And so how do you get, and I feel like when I talked to you about this last time, you're so casual about it, but to me it was really mind-boggling. How do you get from real estate to starting this like revolutionary school for kids with ASD that's doing all these amazing things, especially in so short of a time span?
Yeah. Well, I think the only reason it's revolutionary is because I wasn't classically trained in education. And so I was able to approach why do we do things this way, and come up with maybe some non-conventional approaches to it. But the how, look, whether you believe in divine intervention or providence or whatever you want to call it, Garrett, I kind of felt like I was just led down the path, is the best way I can describe it. It all started with me getting frustrated with options for my son and despair. The whole backstory: we had tried public education, we tried homeschool, we looked at private school options, and there were just frustrations through all of it. And that's not to speak bad about anyone. I love public school. I love the experience my son got, but there was things he needed that just couldn't be offered there. I loved aspects of homeschooling, but I'm a dad. I'm not a teacher. My wife, bless her, like with 4 boys, like just,
Oh, wow.
we couldn't, and it's hard wearing so many hats. Like you just want to be your kid's parent. You don't want to be their provider, and mixing those roles, it just makes a lot of stress in the home environment. And the private options, you know, a lot of them out there, he either didn't identify with, or they were full, or they were kind of very exclusive on who they would and wouldn't allow. And I just got frustrated. And I can remember the day I'm standing in a parking lot with my wife at another school that had denied my son enrollment, and I'm like, that's it. I'm just going to start my own. And it was just purely out of frustration.
Right.
But that seed got planted, and I started thinking, well, if I did, what would that look like? So I called a close friend of mine. He's a mentor friend, very successful businessman. I had done some projects with him in the past, and I just wanted to get his input. It's like, hey, I had this crazy idea. I'm not sure I even know what I'm doing, but it was this idea of blending, right? Just simplifying and cohesively combining these resources in a way that I just couldn't find. And like 5 minutes into the call, he stops me. He says, "I'm in. What do you need?" And I was like, I wasn't soliciting, but I mean, he's like, "No, I'm in. We're doing this." And he wasn't in education. So we went to lunch a couple of days later, had this grand plan that we were going to build our company name, get some branding so that we looked somewhat legitimate other than just me and him that had this weird idea. And I was going to meet with a principal that I heavily respected. He was a principal for my other kids. I knew how state retirement worked for principals in public education. I had no goal of hiring him. I just thought maybe I could catch him in the summer months sometime and he could consult for me. It's a few days after that, I'm dropping my kids off at school, and he's out doing crossing guard duty, and it's raining, and I'm in my gym clothes and Mickey Mouse sweatshirt, and I get this prompting to go talk to him. And I didn't have a name, I didn't have a location, and I was like, no, I'm not ready, we're sticking with the summer plan. But it wouldn't go away, so I ended up just talking to him. And when I mentioned I was thinking about starting a school, he stops me and says, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." He says, "Great, I'll run it for you." And totally caught me off guard. And he explained to me he was actually in his contract window, which for educators happens in the spring, not the summer. I didn't realize that. He's like, "Had you waited till summer, I would have said no, because I already would have been under contract for my next thing. But I'm up for retirement next year, and I've been deciding, what do I do next?" And it's just, Garrett, so many things just fell in my path. And the only reason it happened as quickly as it did is that every piece I needed to make something like this work literally presented it to me within the first couple of weeks. Even down to my business partner, Brad Broyles, who's like our CFO and business backing him. He came from commercial real estate and was a VP for commercial banking. He had more accounting and finance background than I could ever wish for. And I'd never run business systems. I never modeled out business portfolio programs. And he had no experience in autism. And I told him what I was thinking of doing. He's like, "Nathan, I'm in. Like, let's do this." I'm like, "Brad, but you don't know anything about autism." He's like, "I don't care. I can learn." And so, and I'm looking around like, I know nothing about it. My principal was not a specialized autism principal. My finance partner wasn't, but that was okay because we were doing something that no one had tried. And it brought these dynamics from an education perspective, from a finance perspective, from a business creation perspective. And then we networked into people that believed in this vision and were excited about what we could create if we blended. And our staff, I didn't run a single one ad for our staff the first year. They all came organically.
Wow.
So how did it happen so fast? I don't know. It just did. And you know, I talk about this a lot with my business partners. You know, I in real estate, I'm used to pushing a project along, and like it's a grind. I've got to push stuff across the finish line. This one, I feel like I'm being pulled, and I'm just trying to run to keep up.
Wow.
So that's a long and again abstract way to answer your question, but it happened just because I think it was supposed to.
That's fantastic. I had a lot of thoughts while you were talking.
Feel free to cut me off at any point.
No.
I'm a talker, so
Please. It's fantastic to listen to you. So one of the things I'm curious about, and then I've got some other questions, is you talked about how you had no wanted ad for staff your first year. What was your turnover rate like? Because historically, in like if you like ABA centers, for example, they have really high turnover rates.
Yeah.
And most clinics, groups, whatever it is that are associated with ASD tend to have high turnover rates. How do you guys have that? How did you face it? What's the case?
So that first year, none of our teachers left.
Wow.
None of our admin staff left. None of our specialists left. And we had one support aide that for life circumstances chose to leave, but were not let go. They had to have a shift. Wow. So it's great.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny. Prior to doing this, I joke because I'm a CEO now of a company and I have employees that work for me. I guess I'm a boss, in some sense. I've never worked for anybody in my life. I've never been a W-2 employee. I've never been a boss. I've never had a boss. And so I joked with my staff. I'm like, I don't see you guys as working for me. I kind of see you all as working with me. And maybe that's just dumb luck, but it created a very collaborative culture where we were hiring people not to execute a task. We were hiring people to create. And I think there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of fulfillment value in working somewhere where you're not just doing the 9 to 5 because that's just what you're doing at this point in your life. You're part of building something and creating something and innovating in something. And every member of our staff, we involve in that. They're very, 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 very much a part of having created it. I don't think it was just 1, 2, or 3 people that conceptualized this. It was this village effort, and I couldn't have done it without them.
Wow. Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Garrett, and this video was made possible by Redemption Psychiatry. We're a private practice located in Arizona focused on providing mental health services for those in need. If you or anyone else you know is struggling, please feel free to have them give us a call today. Thanks, and we'll get back to the video. So I want to go back to your classrooms and your setup. One of the things I saw while I was there that I really loved is your, I don't know what you call them in your hallways, the sound areas.
Our nooks or our coves.
Yeah. So I'm a huge audiophile. I love sound. I love sound dynamics, acoustics, very passionate about it. And when I sat down in there, I was envious, to say the least. Can you describe for us what that is, how it works, and we'll throw up a picture.
Yeah.
For those watching the podcast, and how that came about, because I really love this.
Yeah, those were an accident, but again, like all of this, I think it was divine intervention. We did a lot of intentional research into autism architecture. It's a very new field. It's not a very known field because it's very specific, but creating an environment that is helpful for kids. And if you look at dysregulation in the autism world, there's and again, I'm not a professional, but this is just my base understanding. There's kind of 4 main areas of dysregulation. You have emotional dysregulation, which is we all deal with, but especially in the spectrum, it's harder to navigate because it can be so abstract. So teaching them those emotionals and responses, OT is great for that. You have behavioral dysregulation, which is a lot more that ABA world, that data-driven, behavior-focused, intentional response. You've got chemical dysregulation, which is kind of your world, right? It's prescriptive. Sometimes there are chemical imbalances that drive this dysregulation. And you have environmental and sensory. And so many institutions that I had been to with my son were triggering just by the nature of their design, whether it was claustrophobic or whether because it felt too sterile or it triggered this, I'm in a medical environment or I'm in a prison environment. It evokes already a sense of you're coming from behind. And so we wanted to create a space that was inviting and warm. It helped with focused attention, but comforting. And we were working with a building that had already existed. And so my as-built plans, I drew based off of this existing framework. And you never get measurements exactly right. And my framers called me one day and says, hey, we're off 2 feet in this one spot. And it's created this alcove. Like, do you want me to frame across it? You want me to wall it in? Do you want me to make it a closet? And I went and I stood there, and I had this memory of going to a public event, and they had these sensory seating pods. And I don't know if you've ever seen them at like carnivals and fairs. Like they'll have like these quiet rooms. Yeah. I've always hated them because it's like you're on full display because there's windows, and you have to do it so you're not boxed in a lightless room. But anybody that goes in there is going to feel anxious because it's like, hey, look at the guy in the box. from a sensory perspective, the sound dampening is great.
Right.
And there was also this seating that kind of was like not fully enclosed, but it was wrapped. And when you'd sit in it, it felt like soft. And I was like, I wonder if I can replicate that. And again, just me getting ahead, I start marketing this to our families of these sensory coves that I promise are going to work. And I have no idea because I've never tried them before. Mm-hmm. But literally, they're just inset into the wall and they're lined with an acoustic felt. It does a couple of things for us. I had been to other schools that had sensory pull-out rooms. And from a regulation standpoint, a sensory room that's got lights and is dim and has swings and books and toys, very calming. Any kid's going to regulate when they have all their preferred tasks, right? The problem is as soon as they pair that, I get to go to the sensory room when I get dysregulated, they kind of want to act out to get to that space. It becomes a reinforcer.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
Exactly. My son liked taking sensory walks when he was in public school. Well, he loves going on walks and he likes getting out of work. So as soon as he paired that with the walk, next thing you know, we're doing 3 walks, 4 walks, 5 walks a day, and it kind of backfires. So, the coves for us, I wanted them to be accommodating but not rewarding. They're decorated very nicely so the kids don't feel like they're in a timeout. And they're not just like this corner in a room where it's like you're going to the special corner. Because again, we're trying not to feel like they're identified or they're
right.
distinct.
It's not a dunce cap experience.
Exactly.
Right.
So these are right out in our main corridor. They're out in the open public space. So kids can see other kids that are also in the cove. But because of that acoustic balance, when you sit back in the cove, you get the sound dynamics as if you were in a private room. Right? You get the sensory experience that things are calmer, but because you're out in the open, you're not also isolated. So the anxiety is not there. They've got these little pull-out desks, so their work follows them if they need to come out or take a break. So they're not getting rewarded for work avoidance either. And they just get to be. It's just quiet study. But there's nothing else. In the class, we have all these engaging activities, and we have our Lego systems and our write and wipe desktops. And so the class becomes the preferred environment. Mm-hmm. And so the kids, once they're there, like the question is, well, when can I go back to class? Because the seats are hard. It's designed that way and intentionally. It's just meant from a sensory perspective to give them that soft reset. By the end of the year, a lot of our kids would self-place, right? Because they just knew how it worked. They knew what they needed. And so they're just a functional way for us to not isolate them, not punish them, not make them feel like they have to hide, but to give them that accommodation in a way that's dignified, but that also doesn't give them that underlying reward that so many other systems have an issue with.
Right. That's really brilliant. It's fantastic. Inside the classroom, you already talked about dim lights, the write and erase tables. Mm-hmm. Walk me through those systems, the Legos, and just how your classrooms are set up, because again, it was really interesting. And one of the things that I keep seeing as you explain these things out to me is really a holistic mentality, which I love. It's something that we focus on a lot here at Redemption. We do psychiatry, we do medication management. We have some providers here who, if you won't see a therapist, they'll move you over to another psychiatrist or say that they're not really comfortable treating you, because it's so important that you get holistic care. And that's not even just therapy and environment. It's also diet, socialization, who you're around. All of these things play a role in mental health, and that's true for our patients. It's true especially for children with ASD. So walk me through your classroom setup. Sorry,
Sure.
It was a long-winded question.
No, that's you. I think I'm more long-winded than you. So Garrett, you take all the time you need. Cool. Classroom's still a work in progress, but the general idea was we wanted it to be an engaging workspace, right? Mm-hmm. The traditional model of I sit in my class, the teacher teaches, I learn and I listen. That doesn't work for this population, especially when you factor ADHD and the other word salad of acronyms that comes with autism spectrum disorder. So, we don't have a traditional whiteboard setup. Mm-hmm. Most classrooms, like the front of the room is clearly distinguished by like 3 or 4 running panels of whiteboards. And then sometimes they'll have some electronic screen inclusion in that. Our whiteboards are more for data, so they can see visual schedules, some structured things that are not for this, the teacher writes and you listen and take notes. We have a digital whiteboard, so it's a TV type setup. It's not just for movies. It literally creates an interactive environment. And a lot of kids on the spectrum respond very well to technology. So it creates a way that when we need focused attention, it draws their attention because we can do a lot of creative, engaging activities with, Google for Education and some other tools. But their desks are the whiteboard. So instead of watching the teacher write and they listen, the teacher teaches and the functional whiteboard is their workstation. Now that gives a lot of creative play because you can get, have a lot of fun engagement with your desk. It has not translated into writing on furniture at home, so that's been a good thing. Yeah. For our younger kids, it introduces elements of like occupational therapy and different grip pattern for fine motor skills and for initial writing and letter dynamics. As they get older, we use it for prototyping and modeling and coming up with creative ideas and blueprints. And I mean, it's just a space that I think is a lot more mentally rewarding than just paper pencil. The classroom itself has adaptive lighting. So a lot of schools that I had toured had like pillow sheets and tin foil over these fluorescent lights. And it just feels ghetto. Like it just screams, okay, we get you're different and our fix is a cheap pillowcase, no, we can put in the right kind of lighting. And it's not fluorescence, it's a specialized LED. The color of light we picked was intentional for focused learning. The spacing of our lights to avoid shadowing or spotlighting effect, like everything about it was designed to just make it feel comfortable and adaptable and adjustable. Our desk structure, if you remember, some of the classrooms, they were in group settings. Some of them it was more forward facing and some of it they were paired. So that blend of academics with our therapy behavior approach, we're playing with desk structures to teach them skills while they're doing their academics. And so that team, our class sizes are right around 15 kids, but I got 3 adults in the class. I got the teacher and then 2 of our licensed behavior technicians. So they're working as a collective team. So we have a good group ratio. We have the ability to be more individualized and support our kids in the way that they really need.
Wow. That's really amazing. I think those sorts of changes, it's really evident to parents because, and we all can tell this, right? We can tell the difference between I care about you and I care about you enough to not get sued, right? And that's sort of the difference between, we're going to create a light system that actually works, that we know is going to have a positive effect on these kids versus, I'm not using these pillow sheets anymore, so we'll just kind of drape them over. And that intentionality, I think, goes so far, especially because, kids pick up on that so well. Most of communication is nonverbal, right? And so when kids are looking at us and what we're doing, the attitudes and the intentionality that we do them with is usually what they pick up on more than what we said we were going to do or that we did it.
Sure.
And so I think it really makes a difference. I want to get into exercise. So kids with ASD tend to be less likely to engage in physical exercise, especially in the cases of like sports, right? Because sports is highly sensory. It can be volatile, right? Especially if you're playing with other kids who don't have ASD, right? Kids can shove, push, scream. It can be a really, maybe for lack of a better word, just hostile environment.
Sure.
And that can lead to kids with ASD not exercising, not engaging in group play. And those things are incredibly important, not just for social development, but for physical health and development. Mm-hmm. What are you doing in that field? What's gym class look like?
It's not like any gym you've seen at other schools. So, my son was the quintessential, it's PE time, it's in a large basketball room, and so all the kids are doing their thing, and he's on the sideline by the coach, right? Because that's a safe space. I wanted to create a spot that, to use a word you touched on, play, taught them how to play. So much about physical movement and development happens with kids when they play, and for neurotypical kids, that's just part of the growing up experience. For whatever reason, developmentally, kids on the spectrum, and a lot of that's social, sometimes it's anxiety driven, sometimes it's just exclusion because kids feel that they're different. They don't get some of those just standard play-based experiences. And so it creates beyond just developmental milestones, it creates social anxiety that's not born out of anything chemical. It's just, I feel anxious because I don't know if I can do those things. I don't have confidence in movement. So we wanted to build, our gym is called the Intentional Play Gym, and it's designed to teach kids not just how to play, but to equip them with the skills to creatively play. So, we've got we call it a tumble track trampoline. It's like a gymnast trampoline. We teach them principles of basic gymnastics: how to tumble, how to roll, how to jump, how to twist, how to flip, right? And then breaking those skills down into their fine motor skill sections to progressively get them to doing these physical movements. For some of the kids, they're hesitant because they've never done it before. For others, there's root reflexes they've never moved through, like that inner ear sensation of being upside down. It's triggering, right? It creates anxiety just because it's a sensation response. Well, getting used to that and realizing it's okay and giving repetition and, repeated exposure, they move through some of these physiological anxieties in ways that now they start to have fun with it. And that dopamine hits, and so they're getting now a different chemical response that's rewarding. And this gym, I'll tell you, Garrett, we have, besides the trampoline, a rock wall, and we have a corner we call the Ninja Training Corner, which teaches them different grappling skills, and it has different obstacles we can attach, detach, move around. And then we have a giant interactive digital display wall that's touch responsive and motion sensitive, right? So we have things that at first glance, you'd go, this is like a jump park on steroids. And you go, this is going to be overstimulating for these kids. It's the craziest thing. When they get in there, it's like the anxieties melt away because their population are their peers. Right. And they don't feel this hesitation because they see other kids with similar limitations. And Garrett, within the first 2 weeks, these kids that were socially withdrawn, these kids that didn't engage with their peers at parks, these kids played, and they played hard. It was, on one sense, it was a bit of a troublemaker because it was a super preferred environment. And so getting them to transition to and out of that was a little difficult.
That's a great problem to have.
It is, but man, I'll tell you what, some of the kids that you would wear headphones around the school, they'd take them off in there, even though it was louder, even though the lights were more aggressive. And this aha light bulb just went off. It's not that these kids don't want to play. It's that they really didn't know how, or they didn't feel comfortable in their environment. And so it creates this space that they are rewarded for play engagement. And by the end of the year, my son was playing basketball at the playground with his brothers, and he'd never done that before. And he just had this confidence about his movement he didn't have before. So it's been fun. I have some of our students that hold their birthday parties at the school in that room. So, it's been great. And it's a testament to, we in our hearts say, this is a population that doesn't know how to play and socialize.
Right.
I will tell you, Garrett, by changing this model where we're putting them in groups rather than isolating them, they're hypersocial. They just needed a spot to connect. And as soon as they had that connection, that safe connection, they're like every other kid. They want to play. They want to be involved. They want to grow. And it's been so fun watching them do it.
That's so cool. It reminds me of sort of engagement theory when it comes to learning new things. Chess is a great example of this. So if you want to teach somebody how to play chess, right, you play 10 games with them. If they win 5, lose 5, right? Or if they even win 4, lose 6, they'll come back excited because they want to figure out how to win.
Yeah.
If you play chess with someone and they win 0, lose 10, they're never playing chess again. And that applies in non-direct win or lose scenarios as well, right? It's if you take a kid and you put him in an environment where he at least feels like, I'm just nothing but losing. He's going to be, I don't want to be in that environment. What's the point?
Fair.
I don't even know where to start. But if you put him in an environment where he's like, oh, I'm doing at least decent, right? I might not be the best, but I'm doing as well as at least some of the people around me, and I'm doing well enough that I can understand that some things are working and some things are not, right? I have a basic idea of how to progress towards better. I can find better. That's exciting. That's engaging. And it seems like that's exactly what you've created in your gym class, basically.
Yeah. I hope so. Really I mean, cool. that was the idea. And
right.
Thank you for putting professional theory to what to us was just a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it reminds me, I'm a huge animal nerd, and especially because so my background's in psychology.
I hope so. You know.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was going to go into counseling, but I actually switched out for business psychology for a variety of reasons. But I really I continue paying attention to like the literature and stuff because I'm just a serious nerd. If you look at mammals, mammals have a disposition to play, and so there's actually a really, really great study that I'm gonna find it, and hopefully I'll be able to attach it to this podcast episode on. I'm not sure if it was mice or rats, but it was one of them in regards to, I think it was rats, in regards to play engagement and ADHD. So if you, rats tickle each other, that's how they play. It's absolutely adorable.
I did not know that.
Them. Yeah, it's strange. You can't hear them laugh because it's too high-pitched, but they do, in fact, giggle. And so if you, every time they engage to play, you take one out and you put him in a separate area, and then you let him go, and he'll come back and he'll try to play, and you remove him. If you do that repeatedly, their motor cortex won't develop correctly, and so they'll have misfires that show up very similarly, and it's always a slight stretch to go from animals directly to correlate to humans, right? But it shows up very similarly to the activity tics you see in ADHD, which is highly correlated with ASD, of the bouncing leg and the repeated self-soothing behaviors of movement. And it's because it's the motor cortex firing and trying to engage with the body, and it's not wired up because the way the motor cortex wires to the body is play as a child.
Interesting.
And it's one of the reasons why it happens as a child is because A, that's development, but B, when you're little, you can play and accidentally be too aggressive, and your parent will be like, "Hey, stop! That actually hurt," but you're not going to actually inflict harm, right? And so that's how you have to learn.
See, that's super insightful. We just, we've got a podcast we started as well, just a community resource for parents on this topic of autism, and that parenting journey is hard. It's called the Polaris Connection, and we had an OT specialist on.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And OT is one of the many resources available, but it's very centered in physical response and emotional regulation. And it's funny, she made a comment. She says, and I'm going to paraphrase, but parents, when we get into this world of autism, we start taking on other hats. In addition to being a parent, we're also the therapist and the provider, and we step into these other roles that she says, the best thing a parent can do is just play with their kids, just be their parent, be their friend, and that is as effective as anything else they could do. So that ties perfect. So I'd love to review that study. That's great.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've already covered a lot. Let's talk about what you're in your second year, right?
Second year, yeah.
Wow. So what's moving forward looking like? How is your transition from year one to year two? And what's the plan as you look at, oh my gosh, we have to go through year 3, 4, 7, 8, and 12, right?
Yeah. What's the plan? Oh my gosh. I hesitate to say we have a plan because it just gets thrown out the window every other week. Mm-hmm. So our problem is we have, I wasn't sure. First off, when I started, I wasn't sure how many other parents had my story. There are educational options out there, and so I didn't know. Am I a one-off? Are there really enough of these kids that they could kind of go to public school, but they're falling through the cracks, but they don't quite fit in private? They're like this in-between displaced group, and what I'm learning is that's a huge percentage of this population. And so as the story's gotten out about what we're doing and how we're approaching it, we're just meeting so many families more than I have space to accommodate. And so right now, our year 2 plan was hone the system in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, year 1 was creation year. It was, Garrett, we didn't even invent our report card until a few days before we had our first parent-teacher conferences. And we were building systems nonstop. But we've got enough in place that fortunately this year we're up for formal accreditation. I needed that because my son's in 9th grade, and I want to be able to have transcripts and get him college ready, to be able to give him a state recognized diploma. So, that credentialing is retroactive as of this year. So we'll be a fully accredited, both academic and STEM institution this year. Wow. And so that allows us to now do the next phase, which is I want to develop our junior high school. We've got the location already identified. So fall of 26, we have 2 new campuses that we're going to be opening. Right now we're in 10,000 square feet and we are bursting at the seams. Each of the new campuses next year independently is like 25,000 square feet plus. So I'm going from 10,000 square feet to 60,000 square feet next year. And that's a huge relief because I want to be able to service as many kids as I can. So that's the 2-year plan. After that, I'm sure those are going to fill up. So it's just looking sustainably. How can we both grow, but still deliver on our promise and not sacrifice quality for quantity? So we're just being conscious. And there was a point, Garrett, where we kind of realized, I'm never going to be able to service even a significant fraction of this population. And so I've had other schools that we've actually toured through our site, and it's odd in business to take your quote unquote competition and open your playbook and say, hey, this is what we're doing. But that's exactly what I'm doing in this field. Like I don't see them as competition. I see them as collaborators. I want them to upgrade what they're doing. I want them to see what I'm doing, because even if this proves what I think will be the right way to approach blended education and support, I can never grow fast enough to influence enough of the kids, even in just our local area. So I need everybody else to come. I want them to see what we're doing. I want them to incorporate as much as possible, because we can't do it without them. So what started as I want a school for my son has turned into I want to raise the bar and change how all of us go about autism education.
Wow. That's fantastic. One of the things I love about just how you're describing everything is your propensity to change, right? Is you're fluid, you're making changes, you're going to look at something and say, okay, that works. And then 2 weeks later, be like, all right, we're just going to throw it out. And I think that's great. And I think people who aren't as familiar with ASD might be like, oh, like, shouldn't you know what you're doing? Right. And that's so absurd. Right. Exactly. And it's so absurd, but it's counterintuitive, because if you're not used to working in this subfield, you don't understand what the need is. And you phrased perfectly earlier, right? If you've met one kid with ASD, you've met one kid. Yeah. Right. And so it's really important that when you're working with this population, you have a highly adaptive mentality and that you have a highly adaptive environment, because if you have an overly structured environment, you kind of slowly start to fall apart, because more and more kids aren't going to fit into whatever thing you've locked up. Yeah. And if you're not changing it, those kids are going to get pushed to the wayside, which is exactly what you're fighting against.
Yeah. And the only thing that creates that, Garrett, is an adaptive culture. The truth, the secret sauce in all of this isn't just the idea, right? The idea is out there. I've told everybody what we're doing, that this is not something that we're holding close to our chest. The execution of that idea, the ability to truly differentiate, to truly adapt and respond, it comes from our staff. The secret sauce of it all is not the idea. Like, yeah, that got the ball rolling, but the people we have and them buying into this vision, they're the ones that adapt. They're the ones that meet the kids at their level. They're the ones that are pivoting. They're the ones that are giving us feedback. They're the ones that the parents are truly trusting to make this difference, to make this vision, happen. So, I can't give enough accolades and thanks for my staff. I mean, they're phenomenal people. And I mentioned I've never worked for or with anybody before in an employment setting. I will tell you, this has been the single most rewarding thing I've done. It's been the most enriching group of people I've ever had the fortunate, blessing to associate with. So
there's one more thing I really want to touch on before I let you go, and that's your personal life experience with this. So you've worked through a massive undertaking. Usually when people go through these things, it's a lot of effort, and it requires changes to your schedule, your time, your ability to be at home with your family. And it usually results in families having to work around it a little bit to make sure everything works. And so to do all of that on top of having a child with ASD is it's sort of twofold. So I'm really curious personally to kind of change tone just a little bit.
Sure.
How did you manage that? What was that like? And how are you dealing with it now?
I forget where this came from, but I was listening to a presentation on like measurement of success, and I think someone asked a question like, how do you balance personal life with success? And the response was something to the effect of finding the balance is the success. And I've really held to that. I've, bless her heart, my wife has put up with my crazy antics, and I've always been a little ADHD in my business focus. I've done a lot of things. I've found a lot of great success. And really the how do you have balance? It's knowing the people that are important to you and giving time to the areas that matter. Everything else falls into place. As a parent on the spectrum, I'm not unique in the sense that schedules and structure and balance are just inherently hard. I mean, that's something that's true for any parent. And, my wife gets the brunt of it. I mean, it was a life's dedication to providing everything our son needs while still being there for 3 other kids that in their own right are different. And Garrett, honestly, it was going to be hard no matter what. And so I was just blessed to be around people that supported building something that maybe would make the hard a little easier. Before Polaris, our usual day was I'd send my son to school, but the school we finally found for him before we created this was 40 minutes away. So my wife's driving there and back in the morning, there and back to get him in the afternoon, plus the other kids. And in the afternoon, because we have support therapy needs and I can't get them during school, it was 2 to 3 hours a day more of therapies every day, plus Saturdays. And that was hard.
Right.
And by contrast, this isn't hard. This is, I joke with my principal, my business partner, when I started developing this school, and I imagine it's probably a lot like your field, seeing how I could help people. I just got this internal reward that I didn't have. And not that, being a lawyer or being a broker doesn't have financial success.
Sure.
But Garrett, I noticed that I had been chronically pissed off for like 20 years, right? I didn't have this love relationship with my work. It was a means to an end. I was good at it. But for me, it used to be that work and family were like these 2 separate fields. And because I did this for my son, and yeah, it's for other people, but at the core of it, I wanted something for my son. Mm-hmm. My work is my family. And my wife is engaged in it with me, and our kids support it. And the people that jumped in to help bring it to fruition, they're like extended family. And so to me, what used to be the struggle of balancing these multiple lives, just like we blended therapies and academics, it's like my work and family life got smashed together and are blended. And so this has been the balance I think I've always been looking for. It's hard, but the reward offsets the hard. And so, yeah, to circle all the way back, it's not how do we do it? It's I've found this new balance, and the balance for me is a success. Whether it's financial reward or not, it doesn't even matter anymore. This has become kind of like my purpose-driven mission, and it's I don't see myself doing anything else but this.
Wow. Nathan, you're great at this. There's nothing I could possibly say that wouldn't pale in comparison to that. That's a great way to end the podcast. So with that, I would just like to thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
You've been an absolute pleasure to have, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a really good time learning about Polaris Academy today. If you want to learn more about what they're doing, please feel free to follow the links that are in the description. Thanks.
Wow, Nathan, that was amazing. What are some final takeaways for our audience?
You know what, Brad, I just appreciate being able to tell our story. We're a podcast for connecting, but I can't tell you how much it means to me that people find an interest in our work. And so, parents, some of this you may have heard before, but we just appreciate you listening. We appreciate your support. We appreciate you sharing it so other people know this is an option and, the good things that we can do. And now the connections, we're making connections, not just connecting you, but as a group, we have these professionals that we're able to finally connect with on a common vision. So it's just good to know that there's people out there supporting and joining us on this mission to make autism education awesome.
That's wonderful. Please subscribe, please share. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. Now let's go do some good.